Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 6th County of Los Angeles Citizen Redistricting Commission regular public meeting for 2021. Today is March 10th, 2021, and the time is 7:04 p.m. We will now call the meeting to order. As a reminder to the public, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to youtube.com/LA County Redistricting. The link to the recording will also be posted and accessible through the Los Angeles County Redistricting website. If at any time members of the public have any technical difficulties, please message me, Tyler, and we can work towards fixing the issue. I will now take the roll. Commissioners, please be prepared to unmute your mic and respond when your name is called. Commissioner Jean Franklin.
Present.
Commissioner David Holtzman.
Here.
Co-Chair Daniel Maeda.
Present.
Commissioner Mark Mendoza.
Present.
Commissioner Apolonio Morales.
Here.
Commissioner Nelson Obregon.
Present.
Commissioner Priscilla Orpanella Segura.
Here.
Commissioner Hyla Soto.
Here.
Commissioner Saida Soto. Commissioner Priya Sridharan.
Here.
Commissioner Brian Stetcher.
Present.
Commissioner John Bento.
Present.
Co-Chair Carolyn Williams.
Present.
And Commissioner Dorina Wong.
Here.
Thank you. I will now turn the agenda over to Co-Chair Williams.
And if I may, can you confirm that it's recording, Ty?
Yes, it is both recording and live streaming to YouTube.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry, here we are. Looked like I was about to run out of power. Thank you, Ty. So we're here, the approval of the agenda. Are there any requests regarding the agenda? If not, the agenda is approved. So now we'll go to public comments. Ty, I will turn it over to you.
Great. So as a reminder for members of the public interested in making a comment, please enter into the Q&A section the following information that you are interested in making a public comment, your name, the organization you are affiliated with, if any, and which agenda item you would like to make a public comment on. When you are called to make your public comment, you will be prompted to unmute your mic so that you can speak. So currently for public comments, general public comments, there are nobody.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ty. So no public comments. But before we go to the consent items, I'd just like to announce that the co-chairs, Dan Maeda and myself, have appointed Ty as our clerk. And so I want to say congratulations to Ty. We appreciate it, and we look forward to having you in that role. So now I hand it over to Dan. I'm sorry, Co-Chair Maeda.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair Williams. We are at the point of the agenda for the consent items, the approval of the minutes of February 24th, 2021 regular meeting of the commission. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes of the February 24th meeting? Let me pull this up. Okay, I don't see any corrections or additions to the minutes. I will entertain a motion to have those minutes approved as read.
So moved.
Co-Chair Williams moves. A second. Commissioner Stetcher. Any further discussion? I'll now have Ty call the roll, but before he does that, I'll just mention that Co-Chair Williams and I met since the last meeting, and we considered the suggestion that Commissioner Holtzman brought from the San Diego Commission to have a more random process for roll call votes other than attendance. And so Ty has agreed to try to do that more randomly, so it's not always in alphabetical order. So we'll try that and see how it works. So go ahead and take the votes on that, Ty, if you would.
Thank you, Co-Chair Maeda. And again, to make it as random as possible, but also as fair as possible, I will be calling roll in a rotating alphabetical order. So I'll start with Commissioner David Holtzman. Commissioner Holtzman, I believe you are muted.
Yes, I was muted. Sorry, I was on another. Okay, yes, my answer is yes.
Co-Chair Daniel Maeda.
Aye.
Commissioner Mark Mendoza.
Aye.
Commissioner Apolonio Morales.
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson Obregon.
Yes.
Commissioner Priscilla Orpanella Segura.
Yes.
Commissioner Hyla Soto.
Yes.
Commissioner Saira Soto.
Yes.
Commissioner Priya Shidaran.
Yes.
Commissioner Brian Stetcher.
Yes.
Commissioner John Vento.
Yes.
Co-Chair Carolyn Williams.
Yes.
Commissioner Dorina Wong.
Yes.
And Commissioner Jean Franklin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And now we are into the action items. 6A, the CRC Education Working Group has brought us a speaker, and I will introduce the lead of the working group, Commissioner Mark Mendoza, to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Co-Chair Maeda. As part of the Commission's training and education, we have invited the highly esteemed, very accomplished, widely published Mr. Justin Levitt to speak to us about the Voting Rights Act. Mr. Levitt is licensed to practice law in California and New York and places in between. He was educated at the finest universities in the country. Mr. Levitt is a scholar of constitutional law and the law of democracy and is presently on the faculty of the Loyola Law School. After Mr. Levitt's presentation, we plan to have time for questions. With that, Justin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, and thank you to the rest of the commissioners, to all of you for your service and for the invitation to be here. I am a constituent and a beneficiary of the work that you are doing, and enormously grateful for the time that you're investing in this process, and really all of you helping to make sure that all Angelenos feel that the supervisor districts have been drawn in a fair and equitable manner. So thank you. It is really a pleasure to be here. You're the ones doing the real work, and I am honored to do what I can to further that. So I have a presentation, and I will share my screen, and with luck, you all are seeing a black slide that doesn't reveal very much other than my name and the fact that we're all here to talk about Los Angeles redistricting. This is sort of tailored for about 45 minutes, but I have breaks in between for questions. And this was really concentrating on the law that California, the law that the federal law asks you to apply as you are working through your process. Because I'll be talking about the law here, the first thing I want to clarify is I am not your lawyer. And I want to make sure that you know that although, as Commissioner Mendoza mentioned, I spend a lot of my time specializing in redistricting. And though I am a lawyer in California, to the extent that you are getting advice from your counsel, you should listen to him or her and not me. I hope to inform you, but I am not representing you, and want to make sure that that's clear from the get-go. Secondly, I want you to know your history, and some of you know this already, but the reason you're here is because Los Angeles County, unfortunately, has performed rather badly at this exercise in the past. For decades, the county was found to have intentionally discriminated against the Latino community in particular in drawing supervisory lines. In 1959, 65, 71, 81, under court threat of drawing the lines, they were given another chance in 1990 and still managed to run afoul of the law. Because of that, LA County entered a consent decree with the Department of Justice, giving redistricting power essentially over to the supervision of the US Department of Justice. That's a procedure called preclearance. It was, in the original Voting Rights Act, reserved for the jurisdictions with the worst histories of race relations and the worst histories of racial discrimination in the country. And because of its repeated intentional discrimination because of recidivism, essentially, LA County joined that fairly ignominious group in 2000 for the 2000 cycle. It was under the order from 1991 through 2002. In 2010, in the first cycle in decades that had not been marred previously by intentional discrimination, that wasn't under supervision of the Justice Department, there was a redistricting plan approved, and it was not challenged in court, but it was highly controversial. It was approved over the objection of the supervisor representing then the only district responsive to the Latino community in Los Angeles. The fourth vote was provided explicitly on the record. I'm not intuiting the supervisor's intent. He explained that he was voting for the map only in order to expedite the process to get to a federal court quicker. Those aren't the optimal conditions for drawing district lines when one of your supervisors is telling you, I'm only voting yes on this so that we can get to court sooner. So this is the history. And courts, including the Ninth Circuit, the federal court that sits over Los Angeles, were pretty plain about what had been going on. For decades, the court said, the county intentionally fragmented the Hispanic population among the various districts in order to dilute the effect of the Hispanic vote in future elections and preserve the incumbencies of the Anglo members of the Board of Supervisors. And then from the dissent in the same case, agreeing with the same concept, disagreeing on the mechanics, but agreeing with the same concept, conservative judge, when the dust has settled and local passions have cooled, this case will be remembered for its lucid demonstration that elected officials engaged in the single-minded pursuit of incumbency can run roughshod over the rights of protected minorities. The record is littered, they said, with telltale signs that reapportionments going back at least as far as 1959 were motivated to no small degree by the desire to assure that no supervisorial district would include too much of the burgeoning Hispanic population. That's why you're here, is because of this history. It led directly, and the legislature made no mistake about it, to SB 958 and to the law that created this commission. And so as you work through this process, the reason I am thanking you for the work that you're about to undertake is because you are the reason why Angelenos may have some faith this cycle that the districts are not drawn with the intent of incumbent supervisors in mind and their interests in mind, but rather with the interests of communities in and around Los Angeles. You are there to try and break this chain. And I am exceedingly confident that you will do so. The fact that you are engaged in that effort and trying in that effort is already an improvement over cycles past. So thank you for your work. What are you going to have to consider when you do this? So there are two main federal requirements, and I'll go through the first one quickly and then move on to the Voting Rights Act, the second main federal requirement, and then several requirements put in place in state law that will guide you in this path. Start with the equal population mandate. It's the reason that we're redistricting after a census. There's a requirement that districts be roughly equally populated, that representation be roughly equal, so that every time we take a census, every time we know where the population is, we redraw the lines of it. When I say reasonably equal, I do not mean, and this is very important, exactly, precisely equal in the number of people. The Supreme Court has said districts have to be reasonably equal. State law has the same requirement. And the court has interpreted that to mean about a 10% difference in local districts, more or less in the population. This is an example of 10 districts. I know you only have 5. If you've got a total population in each district, you can compute the total and the average population. You can see how much districts are above or below the average. Take the largest, take the smallest, and that total deviation is what you're looking for. And as long as that's within about 10%, the court has said it's not going to look much closer as long as it's not a bad reason driving the differences you have. What are the bad reasons? They've said partisanship can't be a reason to make sure that you underpopulate some districts and overpopulate others. If you put all of the Republicans in underpopulated districts and all of the Democrats in overpopulated ones, or vice versa, even if that's within 10%, that would not be okay. But all of the other criteria that you're going to consider, leaving the districts slightly unequal in order to apply those other criteria is not only just legally fine, it's legally required. When you look at California state law, it says that the districts can be unequally populated. They shall be equally populated except where required by the Voting Rights Act or otherwise allowed by law. And what that means is you have the latitude to use all of this give in the size of your district. Why is that important? Two reasons. One, the census may be rocky this time around. There have been reports that the census has had some trouble with the pandemic. We have all had some trouble with the pandemic. I'm not meeting with you today in person, but rather from my home and yours. That's affected the census as well. And some of that trouble they're attempting to fix right now. As you probably heard, they're going to be a little later with the data coming out than we would all prefer, and a little later than they had anticipated. They're trying to fix as many of the problems as they can, but some of those problems may not be fixable. The census orients itself toward April of 2020, and April of 2020 was a time of pretty serious disruption around the country. If you know through other reliable data that certain areas of LA County are undercounted, you're not permitted by state law to use that other data to draw district lines. You have to use the data the census gives you. But I think you are permitted to use the flexibility in the equal population standard to underpopulate districts you know have more people and overpopulate districts you know have fewer people. That is, within the flexibility of the equal population standard, you may be able to use your information about where the census may or may not be accurate in order to compensate for known disruptions. I'm not suggesting you use alternative data, can't do that, but you do have latitude that allows you, if you know that the census is off in a particular place, to use that latitude accordingly. You also can use this latitude to achieve other objectives, to comply with the Voting Rights Act, to keep communities together, to do all of the other things that I'll be talking about a little bit later. That flexibility becomes important. The second thing just to know is that California state law will give you a data set that's not quite what the census gives you. And the statewide database up at Berkeley will make these adjustments for you. But California passed a law that says that people who are incarcerated will be counted not where they are incarcerated, but where they're from, the home communities where they were before they were incarcerated. That's often important because populations who are imprisoned, sometimes, depending on where the prisons are and where the populations are from, don't look like their surrounding community. And when people are counted where they're incarcerated, that can lead to real mismatches in the communities represented there. For example, the California State Prison of LA County is up in Lancaster, and its population is, as of 2010, approximately 37% Black, about 39% Hispanic, about 18% Anglo. The surrounding population of Lancaster looks very different. And many of those individuals who are incarcerated in Lancaster aren't from Lancaster. So the state has decided that it will adjust this information and will give you the adjusted information, just like it's giving the statewide commission the adjusted information and all of the other commissions throughout California. We'll be making this available so that people who are incarcerated are represented where they're from and not where they're currently held. Now on to the Voting Rights Act. The requirements to consider race and ethnicity, and this is tremendously complicated. I will try to distill it to 3 easy rules because I think those rules will actually guide you more than getting into the deep weeds of the nuance. Rule 1, don't try to hurt people based on their race or ethnicity. That is, don't do what the supervisors were found to have done for 60 years in Los Angeles. It doesn't matter if the lines are pretty. It doesn't matter what the ultimate motive is. If you sort people based on their race or ethnicity in order to either crack communities apart so they can't achieve power in any one district, or pack communities overly together so that they're tokenized and their influence is diluted elsewhere, that amounts to a constitutional violation. Setting out with the intent to injure a population based on their race or ethnicity, not okay. I don't think that's going to be the one that you're going to have trouble with. I think that the Voting Rights Act may prove more challenging just because it's more detailed. So Rule 2, comply with the Voting Rights Act. What does that mean? First, and this is a distillation of the tests that the courts have put forward, are there sizable, relatively concentrated minority communities in the area? In LA County, the answer is emphatically yes. Do those minority communities have distinct electoral preferences? And here I'll say, I'm not sure what the answer is. You may have to retain somebody to find out. I'll talk a little bit more about how you do that. Did or do underrepresented minorities face discrimination or still feel the lingering effects of that discrimination? In much of LA County, unfortunately, that answer is going to be yes. Witness the history I just gave you about the supervisory districts in place for 50 years. If these three things, if the answer is yes, and the second question is going to be the thorniest one, can we design districts to give minorities a fair shot? That's really what the Voting Rights Act requires. Let me go into each one in a little bit more detail, and after this, I'll stop and see if you have any questions. First, are there sizable, relatively concentrated minority communities? The courts have worked this out to say, can you find a group or groups of minorities that represent more than 50% of the electorate in a district-sized population? Do the groups in a population that's about the size of a district, remember what we just talked before, there's some give in that measure. Do the minority communities, could they constitute at least half of the electorate, at least half of the eligible voters? So you're going to be looking for two different things: a total population group that's about district size, and the electorate, the citizen voting age population, to see whether half of the sitting age voting age population is a minority group or groups in that area. CVAP, the citizen voting age population, is something you'll begin to hear quite a bit if you haven't already. How do you know if there are sizable, relatively concentrated minority communities? You may ask staff to prepare you maps like these, not only when the census data arrive, but projections from the past few years. This is a map from 2016 of Los Angeles area. It's not the whole county, obviously. And it shows Anglo populations, Black populations, Hispanic populations, Asian American populations. And you can see in some areas, the answer seems quite obvious that there are sizable concentrated minority communities. In others, you may have to dig around a little bit to see if the numbers approach 50% of the electorate in a district-sized area. But this will help you visualize at least where to start looking. The second question, the thorny one, is whether minority communities have distinct electoral preferences. And here, the Voting Rights Act does not assume that people vote the same way based on their race or ethnicity. It has to be proven. That is, you've got to actually follow the data to see whether there are distinct differences between the preferences of minority community or communities and the surrounding electorate. Now, we don't know, obviously, how you voted based on your race, based on your ballot. Once you submit your ballot, it's a secret ballot and nobody knows whom you voted for. So the way that we generally determine whether there are distinct preferences in minority communities is to look for patterns. Unmistakable patterns that over time either show or don't have the statistical power to show whether a particular community has distinct preferences. The easiest way to think about this, imagine one precinct that's entirely Latino, that happens to prefer almost entirely one candidate, and another precinct that's almost entirely Anglo that votes against that Latino preferred candidate and prefers somebody else. Those might be endpoints of a graph. And if, as you look at various precincts with various different ethnic compositions, you see a pattern emerge where the more Latino the precinct, boy, it sure looks like they're preferring the same candidate. That's how the courts establish, that's how scientists establish what's called racially polarized voting. Again, not something that can be assumed, something that has to be tested. The best way to test is to look at a mix of elections to see whether there are consistent patterns across elections over time and over the type of election you're looking for. It's rare that you'll be able to pick out a real clear pattern in just one race. So you look for multiple elections, trying to see whether the precincts show a pattern. And this graph here is one instance, one election. Each circle represents a precinct. And so you can see the precincts clustered here. This happens to be from Los Angeles County, but I'm not going to tell you which election. I'm not going to tell you which candidate. Was a fair time ago. But it's from LA County, and you can see there are a lot of precincts in LA County. LA County is very big. So when the circles line up, as they do here in a pretty tight cluster, that's a pretty good indication that at least here, Latino voting was in this particular election quite cohesive. The Latino community seemed to have clear preferences for one type of candidate. You don't know from this map alone, from this graph alone, whether the Anglo community had similar preferences or different preferences, or whether the African American community or the Asian American community in the area had similar preferences or different preferences. So this alone only tells you that Latino voting was cohesive. You'd need versions of this for other racial or ethnic groups in order to see whether they were similarly cohesive in the same direction, cohesive in a different direction, or not cohesive at all, whether it really made no difference in the composition of the precinct, how people tended to vote. These calculations are something that political scientists do. You can find political scientists who will run racially polarized voting studies. They come with margins of error and margins of certainty. They are, if you find that two or more minority groups share preferences, the Voting Rights Act considers them as one group for these purposes. If you find that two or more minority groups have very distinct preferences, the Voting Rights Act considers them distinct. And these voting patterns are not meant to simply reflect partisan affiliations. They might reflect partisan affiliations, but you may also find that voting is polarized in a partisan general election and not polarized in a nonpartisan primary or partisan primary. That is, depending on the types of cues available and the types of races available, you may find that voting patterns differ. And the most reliable elections to look at how people vote in a county supervisory race are supervisory elections. Beyond that, you can also look at other county-wide nonpartisan races, and then beyond that, you may be able to find patterns in partisan races for state legislature or Congress or the like. This analysis is something that you're probably going to want to take a look at early. You're probably going to want to start finding someone to do early. It does not need to wait for the census data to arrive. Census data is coming out about September 30th. You don't have to wait for that to start finding someone to do it. There are universities around the county, thankfully, that have individuals who can perform and have performed in courts and otherwise this sort of analysis. So this is something that I'd recommend getting on top of. The question of which groups may have similar voting patterns with others is going to be one of the I would say, the biggest unknowns in Los Angeles, or the extent to which, really, which groups have different preferences than others. I'll go quickly. The third question I mentioned, do underrepresented minorities face discrimination? There are a series of tests in the law that try and work out whether there are danger signs of present discrimination or lingering effects of past discrimination. Unfortunately, in LA County, you can find a lot of these danger signs in various places. So in much of LA County, you will find that the answers to these sorts of questions is still, unfortunately, yes. And if you find that there are sizable concentrated minorities with distinct voting patterns, where there is either danger signs of present discrimination or lingering effects of past discrimination, then the question is, can we design districts to give minorities a fair shot? What does that mean? Using the same sorts of tests of electoral effectiveness, how cohesive the minority community is, how cohesive opposing communities are. You have to figure out about what it takes to draw lines so that minority communities have a real possibility of electing somebody, more likely than not, a candidate of their choice. I should add, the Voting Rights Act is responsive not to the racial identity of candidates, but to the racial identity of the community. It's about the community's preference, not the candidate's preference. But courts have tended to view elections as more meaningful in terms of figuring out whether voting is polarized when there are multiple candidates running, some of whom represent the same racial identity of the community you're interested in. Community may respond differently, for example, when asked to choose among several white candidates, as when asked to choose a candidate who more closely reflects their own ethnic identity, or the community may not. But that's it's seen as a tighter testing ground for that proposition. So if you find that there are responsibilities, see what the local threshold is. It may be that you have to draw a district at more than 50% of the electorate of the group in order to give a real meaningful opportunity based on turnout patterns and based on electoral proportions in the past. It may be that you have to draw at 51%. It may be that you can draw at 42 or 43% if there's reliable crossover voters from others who sometimes agree with that racial or ethnic community's choice. The Voting Rights Act is relentlessly locally focused and relentlessly pragmatic. So it's really going to depend on what the community is, where, and what the electoral patterns are where in the county. Consider other criteria at the same time. I'll get into that in just 1 second, and then repeat, iterate. Once you've drawn one district, make sure that you haven't messed up something that you were doing one district over. Redistricting is about ripples, and every district in LA County is going to affect every other district in LA County. Why consider other things at the same time? Rule 3 is that the Supreme Court and courts will look at districts drawn predominantly on the basis of race, where the primary reason for moving people into or out of a district was race and not other things, with a skeptical eye. What does that mean for you? It means that if you consider race, but also consider other factors like community interests, like neighborhood lines, we'll get to some of those other factors in just a second, then you'll be on safer ground. You do this all the time. Everybody in LA does this all the time when you drive. So you know it's really important not to speed. And you probably check the speedometer when you're driving. If you stare predominantly at the speedometer, you're going to crash. That is, if you're driving down the road and you are staring predominantly at the speedometer, you're going to crash. But nobody does that. You look at the road, you look at where you're going, you look at the traffic, you look at the weather, you look at the person who's merging from the next lane, you consider your passenger's comfort, you consider the heat in the air and the radio, and how much fuel you have in the tank. And you also, from time to time, check in with the speedometer. And if you take the same approach to redistricting, just like with driving, you'll be fine. So if you are drawing districts for Voting Rights Act purposes or for other purposes to accommodate other communities, it is entirely acceptable to consider race and ethnicity beyond the Voting Rights Act as well. Just make sure when you do, you're considering other factors at the same time and not staring at the speedometer. I'm going to skip over that because that basically just encapsulates what I just said. The California Voting Rights Act, the good news is you don't have to worry about it. It only applies to jurisdictions with at-large elections, not where candidates are elected from single-member districts as they are in LA County. I mention it only because you'll hear a lot about the California Voting Rights Act, and you needn't be concerned with that. And after everything I've just said, that's probably some relief. So let me, before I go through the rest of the criteria, and they'll be shorter, I promise, let me see if there are any questions. And unfortunately, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see you, because that's the only way I can see if there are questions. And I'll happily call on people or leave it to the chair to call on people, or however you prefer. I'm a professor, so I'm used to calling on people. That's not a problem.
So, Justin, we have sort of an order. You'll see up at the top, there are hands raised, and Ty can call on them in the order their hands pop up.
I will rely on Ty to
Commissioner
call on
Stetcher's
the last
first
one.
up.
Great. So then we first have Commissioner Stetcher, then Co-Chair Maeda, and Commissioner Wong.
Thank you. I have a couple of sort of technical questions, and I'll ask one, but I'm just curious if we could send you others after the presentation.
You are more than welcome to send me questions. I'll repeat the first slide, which is I'm not your lawyer, but I'm more than happy to answer questions.
They're about interpreting your remarks.
Mm-hmm.
So my first one is, in discussing this at various times, looking at racial groups at various times, we've talked about the citizen voting age population, CVAP, registered voters, actual votes, and minority communities. The laws that you're talking about, do they all focus on the same metric, CVAP, or are some of these other ways of looking at the population also important for us to consider?
It's a great question. It's an excellent question. So the Voting Rights Act, the primary one that I focused on, focuses on electoral power, but it uses several of the data points that you've talked about to do that. So the first threshold question is, can you find half of the electorate, the CVAP, within a district-sized total population that is one or more community groups that vote together? So right there, you use both total population and CVAP. In trying to figure out how that community votes and whether it votes cohesively, you'll probably look to, there are some ways in which you look to the registered voter base or the actual voters to try and figure out the composition of a precinct. There are two different tools. Anybody you engage to do this will use one of the two tools to figure out what the precinct's composition is. One is to assume that the precinct mirrors the surrounding demographics. So you get the census figures for the surrounding demographics and apply them to the precinct. The other takes the voter rolls as they are and tries to figure out the racial or ethnic mix of the precinct from the voter rolls, bottom up. Best practice is to try and do both, and they arrive at close to the same answer. So the short version is yes. Which data point you use depends on what you're looking for.
Co-Chair Maeda.
Thank you, Mr. Levitt. This is really helpful. A couple of quick questions. First, you used the term, you orally used the term minorities, and your slides reflect that. Can I get clarification that what you're talking about is communities of color as opposed to literal population minorities?
Yes, sorry, Co-Chair. That is also an excellent clarification. The Voting Rights Act actually specifies that it is focused on racial minorities in particular, or language minorities of Spanish, Asian American, or Native American origin. So it's very specific to racial and language minorities, yes.
But more than that, if Los Angeles County, if the majority of the population is Latino, if there still would be considered minority for purposes of the Voting Rights Act criteria. Okay. And then one of the things I'm having trouble grasping or grappling with is we have a number of criteria we're supposed to be looking at or trying to deal with when we draw lines. I think it's going to be very difficult for us to keep everything in our heads at the same time when we draw, and yet a race can't be a predominant basis, right? But is it okay to, for instance, as one example, start with a racial framework and have some idea what that's like, and then consider how that framework would affect other factors? Would
Yes.
that be considered to be predominant, or just it's one of the factors, so it's okay?
No, I think that's exactly right. And in fact, California law asks that you consider federal law, including the Voting Rights Act, before considering some of these other factors. So it directs you to take that into account as a higher criteria. The way that I would suggest thinking about it is you're going to want to know what the speed limit is before you get in the car. But that doesn't mean you spend every mile focusing on the speed limit. So yes, first figure out what the speed limit is. You got to know, are you driving on a side street? Are you driving on the freeway? Are you driving, where are you driving? That's going to govern how you drive. But then as you drive, don't fixate entirely on the speed limit. Consider other things as you go. So yes, the framework of where am I likely to have Voting Rights Act responsibilities? Which communities am I going to have to be responsive to, and what parts of LA? And that answer may differ. There may be different voting patterns and different conglomerations of minorities in different parts of LA. To get a feel for where the districts you'll probably have to draw to be responsive electorally to those communities. And then that's your speed limit. And then you can layer in all of the other things that you're considering as you go along.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wong, then Commissioner Vento.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I had just a couple of questions. One was, when we're looking at evidence of voting cohesiveness, and you gave examples of that, with those precinct voting, is exit polling also one way to show it? And, other tools like that, surveys to show voter preference? And then also I had a question about, when you're thinking about racial minorities, you're talking about are we talking about larger racial categories, or can we go down to kind of disaggregated racial groups? I'm thinking in particular for the Asian community, where there's, smaller subpopulations of Asians, and how that would work into considerations of as a racial minority.
For sure. Those are excellent questions. The first question, actually, forgive me, I've now lost the thread in the first question because the second question was so good.
The first question was about other tools to show voter cohesiveness, whether you can use exit polling.
Yes. So for various reasons, exit polling and surveys aren't perfectly reliable. And they are available, but they're not the gold standard. So courts have used them in the past. They are considered viable evidence. They are often used to supplement, or where no other information is available, they have been used in cases. But if you're able to see the actual electoral data instead, that's usually considered the gold standard. So I'd say they are I wouldn't recommend relying on them alone unless you have no other source. But if you have no other source, they have been accepted by courts in the past. The second question about disaggregated racial or ethnic groups, the short version is it depends on electoral cohesion. So if you find that, for example, a group of Asian Americans from various countries of origin don't appear to vote cohesively, but within that mix, a group of Vietnamese Americans do appear to vote cohesively, differently from the rest of the population. And that's what's causing it to appear to be not cohesive. If the Vietnamese American population is large enough to constitute 50% of the citizen voting age population in a population size district, it is entirely legitimate to draw districts to respond to that distinct electoral community. It all depends on whether there is electoral cohesion at the smaller levels of aggregation or not, and whether the groups, when combined, have electoral cohesion. So it may be that Vietnamese Americans and Chinese Americans in part of Los Angeles County have very similar voting preferences. And if so, it's fine to consider them as undifferentiated Asian American groups for Voting Rights Act purposes. If the data show that. And if the data don't show that, then it's not okay to assume. I'll say, I want to emphasize again, separate from the Voting Rights Act, it is fine to consider race and ethnicity in considering other communities of interest above and beyond what federal law requires. And California law directs you to consider communities of interest defined not just around, here this is to the co-chair's question, not just around race or ethnicity, but around many other different potential communities. And it is fine to consider race and ethnicity in that mix. So even if the data don't reveal an obligation under the Voting Rights Act, to Commissioner Wong's point, it may be entirely not only permissible, but desirable to consider various sub-ethnic groups within a broader ethnic coalition as forming a community of interest that is the basis for a district.
Commissioner Bentel, then Commissioner Holtzman.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Levitt. I just had a couple questions. Number one, would we be able to get a copy of your PowerPoint slide?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And then number two, what was the
Actually,
case
John,
that?
if I may,
I'm sorry.
for the public,
Yes.
all of the slides are available under tonight's meeting. There's a link, so you'll find them all there.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you, Gayla.
Already posted.
Really appreciate that. What was the citation of the case citation that you mentioned about in the 2010? Do you know the case citation?
So the 2010 wasn't the case. That was just from the record of the supervisors meeting in 2010. The case itself was from 1990. I believe it was 1990. It's possible it's 1991. Called Garza, G-A-R-Z-A, versus the County of Los Angeles. And I'll put the legal site in the chat.
Thank you. That's all.
Of course.
Commissioner Holtzman.
Oh, hi, Justin.
Hello.
Hi. I just have one quick question and one bigger question here. The quick question is, when you're doing the CVAP analysis, do you have to adjust for felon disenfranchisement? It's 50% of...
So the short version is no, because that's not based on... oh, I see. When you're talking about the electorate. I don't know that any court has, is the short version. The fact that California is reallocating people who are incarcerated back to their home communities actually makes things a little bit easier for you. So you can take that data as helping to correct the distortion that already exists a little bit. But I don't know that any court has. And I don't know that any court has required it of a redistricting body.
I don't know, but I think in some communities it might be somewhat significant. Anyway, let me get to my other question. My other question is that I missed a couple of things on your slide 18 about Voting Rights Act responsibility. I'm going to quickly share my screen.
Okay.
Can you see my screen now where it says voting rights?
I can.
How about that, my cursor? So I was highlighting and squiggling as you went along. I missed this. I missed what you meant by consider other criteria at the same time. So I have a question mark there. And then what do you do when you're repeating? That's different.
So both excellent questions. Consider other criteria at the same time has to do with this rule number 3, don't just stare at the speed limit. It's about when you're actually drawing the districts, when you know where you're aiming, when you know what sort of electoral effectiveness you have to approach for the minority community or communities in question. Also consider things like local neighborhoods, local communities of interest, things like the compactness requirements. It's best practice to consider other things in addition to the Voting Rights Act responsibility at the same time, so that you're not staring just at the speed limit. And then repeat, I just mean people have occasionally fallen into the trap of getting locked into a district, then making changes elsewhere in the county and not realizing the ripple effects have now changed the original district. So you're going to want to make sure that as you work through the districting, that if you've made changes elsewhere that affect this district you thought you had just right, that you go back and check. It's often the process that you'll draw and then realize that you needed to shift a population from place to place in order to do something else you wanted to achieve. And that may have thrown off the balance that you were looking for. That may have put you over the speed limit or under the speed limit in the particular district you're looking at.
I see. Draw a map, then look at the speedometer again.
Yeah, correct.
And a fair shot, what was your definition of a fair shot?
So that has been worked out. That's my shorthand. Obviously, all of this is shorthand. The shorthand is essentially, does the minority community have an equitable opportunity to elect candidates of its choice? Meaning, more likely than not, is that community able to drive the election? So that's where you look at the electoral effectiveness and you see whether that minority community or communities in that district would likely win a hypothetical future election most of the time. Not 100%, but most of the time.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You bet.
Co-Chair Williams. Co-Chair Williams, I believe you're muted.
Okay, sorry, my screen has a tendency to disappear on occasion. My question has to do with the where you said the County of LA was under the supervision of the U.S. Department of Justice from 1991 to 2002.
Correct.
So how did that affect redistricting? Did that mean they had to redraw the lines or what? What was the impact?
That's a great question. So the lines were drawn in 1991 under court order. The federal court actually drew the lines. In 2001, under the supervision of the Department of Justice, after the 2000 census, it was time to redistrict LA County once again. The supervisors redrew the lines, but they had to submit the lines to the US Department of Justice for approval before those lines could go into effect. That was pursuant to a court order, it was pursuant to a settlement in that same 1991 case that said, the next time you draw, you're going to have to run these by the Department of Justice to make sure they're not discriminatory. So the supervisors drew the lines in 2001, but with the responsibility to run them by the Department of Justice first before they took effect.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Vento.
Mr. Levitt, real quick. What happened in 2010 when you said that the one of the supervisors said, "I'm voting just so we can get to the court"? What happened as a result of that situation in 2010?
So the maps in LA had to be passed with the vote of 4 members of the supervisors. The original submissions, I think it's fair to say, came down to 3 different possibilities. And none of the 3 possibilities gained a 4th vote. There was a 3-2 deadlock on the supervisors. And essentially the fight was over allegations that the county wasn't living up to its obligations under the Voting Rights Act under one of the maps that had 3 votes for it. So 2 supervisors were objecting to it under the notion that this would once again split the Latino community, that it would not live up to the obligations under the Voting Rights Act. One of the supervisors said, I'll vote for this, I'll break the deadlock. I'll vote for the map that effectually took place, that went into effect in 2011, and said on the record, I'm doing this in order to get us to a federal court faster. If I don't do this now, it's just going to be more delay. We'll end up there eventually. It turns out that the plan was not actually challenged. And so the federal court didn't, as predicted, resolve the case. So the maps that were passed that day are the maps that we currently have today.
I believe there are no other questions.
So I can continue and wrap this up in 2 minutes, or I can count on you to tell me how much longer you'd like to spend. And either one of those is completely fine with me. I'm at your disposal.
I think we should allot another, let's say, 10 minutes plus some Q&A time on that. Can you do that?
I certainly can. I don't want to burden the rest of the members of the commission, but that's fine with me. And the good news is this moves more quickly. But it's important context, as some of the questions show, it's important context for knowing what else to consider as you are drawing these lines. So I will, with your indulgence, once again share my screen. And it's up on the Garza case. That's how I did put the citation in the chat for those of you that were looking. There are 4 other factors that state law asks you to take into account, and very specifically for LA County. The first is contiguity. Contiguity is pretty easy. All parts of a district must be connected to each other. So if you wanted to draw a smiley face district in LA County, that's impermissible. You got to have all parts of the particular district connected. The one place where that gets weird are the Channel Islands, which belong to LA County and aren't connected by anything other than water. Usually, and in other parts of the law for other counties, state law says that islands usually should be connected in districts by bridges or tunnels or ferry channels. It doesn't actually say that for LA County. And so from your council, you should seek an opinion over whether that's a requirement or not for you. If you choose to follow ferry routes, then you can connect Catalina to either San Pedro or to Long Beach. I don't know how you abide by that when connecting San Clemente, because I'm not aware of any ferry to San Clemente from anywhere. State law also asks you to account for cities, neighborhoods, and communities in equal priority order. Cities are clear, right? Cities are defined, and so you know where the cities are. Neighborhoods are less defined, at least legally. So the LA Times maps several neighborhoods in and around LA County. A gentleman by the name of Eric Brightwell has mapped differently and in a more fine-grained fashion neighborhoods around LA County. There are obviously neighborhood councils in some part of the county that are official or quasi-official city designated neighborhoods. But state law doesn't specify, at least to my knowledge, what you have to consider a neighborhood. And so one of the decisions you'll make is where to draw the lines of neighborhoods and whether to follow any of the pre-existing proposals or not. Same is true of community of interest. So a community of interest is, this is a common definition. It's also the one specific to LA County, but it's not unusual. Just a group of people who share common social and economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of effective and fair representation. That should is essentially up to you. The one thing that you're not allowed to consider as a community of interest are relationships with existing political parties or incumbents or candidates. But beyond that, you get to decide which communities of interest are more important or more cohesive or more need of representation around which parts of LA County. And that decision does not have to be consistent in various parts of the county. You may find that in one part of the county, an industry defines a viable community that should be kept together. And in another part of the county, a racial or ethnic group or shared cultural history is really the most important thing. Or in another part of the county, a relationship with a particular landmark defines a community of interest, or around topography like water, beaches may be a community of interest. You don't have to, once you've decided that a particular type of interest is a community of interest in one part of the county, that doesn't have to govern the communities that you find most important in other parts of the county. And here, the way the way entities normally decide, sometimes aided by census data and sometimes just on their own, is to listen to the communities and find out what they want you to consider. This is where you'll be considering testimony at hearings from other Angelenos about what they consider most important in their area. Compactness is another criterion that, having satisfied everything else, it's explicitly less important in state law. So it says once you've done the other stuff, then see whether you can make districts more compact. In many other places, people think of compactness in terms of abstract shapes. No map, just blank piece of paper. What's the outline of the district look like? The district on the left is less compact than the district on the right. It's stringier and not quite as regularly bordered. But that's not what California law says. In some other places, including in some redistricting software you may have, compactness is measured in terms of geometric formulas. There are over 100 possibilities. I've just labeled a few of them here, but that's also not what California law says. California law has a very specific definition of compactness, also applies to LA County. It says don't bypass nearby population to get to farther population. So if you drew the red district here, that's relatively evenly bordered. In most definitions in other places, that wouldn't really look non-compact. But you'll see that that red district bypasses the blue part. And so it would be less compact than a district that incorporated the blue part, the people in between. That is, California has a definition of compactness that responds not to abstract geometry, but to people. I actually quite like this standard. I think it serves the population better. I think it serves the community better. I also want to emphasize, again, this is a last priority. So compliance with the Voting Rights Act, keeping communities and neighborhoods and cities, which have weird lines, together, is more important explicitly under California law than drawing districts that are compact even under this definition. Finally, California law says, please don't play partisan favorites. And I know that you all represent various parties on the commission. That's done intentionally, but when you put on your commissioner hat, you can't consider the residence of an incumbent or a candidate. That's forbidden under California law. And you can't draw districts for the purposes of favoring or discriminating against a candidate or party. This is really important. This doesn't say you have to draw the districts so that the parties come out roughly even. Right? This says don't set out to help or hurt a candidate or a party. And don't pay attention to where incumbents live. But when you're setting out to draw the districts, use the other criteria to figure out where the line should go. When you are considering criteria, those are the criteria you need to consider. When you're considering criteria, you'll need to be able to take in the testimony you hear. You'll need to distill it and assess it. You'll need to reconcile conflicts, people who are adamant that one community is the more important community in a particular area. You'll have to decide among them, even when there's no right or wrong answer in the abstract. You'll need to be comfortable determining borders that are not predefined, like where neighborhoods are or where communities are. You may need to be comfortable with shapes that seem strange. Notice nothing that I've mentioned so far says that the districts have to look pretty. And I'll caution you to watch out for binding your own hands with absolutes. It is tempting to look to maximize or minimize where the law doesn't require it. But because strict constraints make everything else harder, if you bind your own hands more tightly than the law requires, you give yourself headaches in the various trade-offs that you're going to need to assess. Having districts that are roughly equally populated, compensating for some of the problems that you may know the census has, if you have the data to show it, providing equitable opportunity for minority voting power in the county, preserving neighborhoods and communities and cities, adjusting shape. I mention this only because it is sometimes tempting to start with the thing that is most quantitative, roughly equal population, and say, let's make sure we squeeze all the room out of that. Let's make sure we get everything exactly even. But if you do that, you make everything else harder. And you don't have to do that, so I suggest that you don't. Also watch for natural human tendencies. We prefer clarity to ambiguity. Ambiguity makes us uncomfortable, and it takes more time and mental energy. But in some instances, the law makes ambiguous concepts just as important as clear ones. There's no preference in the law for cities over communities. Cities are clear, communities less so, but the law asks you to consider them equally. And also watch out, this is where I'll close, for learned human tendencies. We all have preconceived notions about what good looks like that are culturally baked in. And many of you know, there have been many, many studies on implicit bias that show that we make assumptions about these faces in front of us with no information other than the faces themselves. And this is a learned but very human tendency. It doesn't mean we're bad, it just means that it exists. This happens in areas other than race as well. So this guy looks like he might be one of my neighbors, hanging out at the gym, working out. And this guy looks like a professional boxer. And when the gentleman on the left, Andy Ruiz, met the gentleman on the right, Anthony Joshua, in a heavyweight boxing match, the betting markets had a 97% prediction that the guy on the right would win the fight, primarily because he looks like a boxer. And yet, those preconceived ideas about what a boxer looks like might not reflect reality. This is true in districting as well. Many of you will have instinctive reactions about these lines and about whether they're good or bad. But I want to caution you, until you know more about what they're doing, you can't possibly know whether these lines are good lines or bad lines or neither. One of these is LA City. One of these is the original gerrymander from 1814. One of these is Thailand, not a district at all. So until you know what these lines are doing, you can't know whether they're good or bad or legal or illegal. And that's really hard sometimes to squeeze out when you have preconceived notions that are very natural, they're learned, about what a good district looks like. So that, I think, Mr. Co-Chair, is exactly my 10-minute mark. And that was the presentation that I had for you today. I'm happy to take additional questions if you have them.
So we have Commissioner Saira Soto, then Commissioner Orpanela Segura.
Hi, good evening. My question is, does the law offer any guidance on how to address our houseless community members as it does with our incarcerated population?
So homeless or houseless individuals are counted in the census. They take extraordinary efforts to try and count individuals in the census and to give them a residential address even when they don't have a permanent residential address or even a temporary residential address. Those populations are large in Los Angeles County, for sure, in various parts of the county, and they are among the harder to count populations. And so the census is by no means perfect at this. The law doesn't have a way to account for them, unfortunately, other than relying on the census numbers. And the census does actually do their level best to get an accurate count. If the city or county has data that actually accurately tally the homeless and you know them to be resident in a particular spot, and the Census Bureau appears to have undercounted that block, that's one of the ways that you may rely on the other data to use your latitude to slightly undercount or slightly overpopulate a district. Again, I want to be careful. Don't draw the districts based on the other data. Draw the districts based on the census. You have to do that. But you can. The districts don't have to be exactly the same population. And if you know that there is a homeless community and you know it's been missed, that may be one place where you use the latitude that you have. But I'll tell you, coming by that information accurately is really, really hard. The Census Bureau tries really hard to count the houseless population, and there aren't many good sources of data that I know of that do a better job of trying to figure out not just how many houseless or homeless people there are in LA County, but where they might be. So it's a difficult problem.
Commissioner Orpanela Segura, then Commissioner Holtzman.
Thank you, Mr. Levitt, for the presentation. It's been very informative. My question is with the communities of interest. I'm not sure that I fully understand the concept. So are you able to provide examples of what that would represent? And would a community of interest, I guess, can a community of interest be within a neighborhood? Like, do they cross? And I'm not sure if they're counted twice, or I just wanted some clarity on that.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And the short version is they don't have to be coexistent with neighborhoods. They can span neighborhoods. They can be within a neighborhood. They can be combinations of different neighborhoods. Anything with a tie that indicates they might have a legislative interest, any social or economic characteristics. So that can really be, it can run the gamut. A particular cultural heritage can be a community of interest. I don't want to give you examples from LA because I don't want to start you off with my presumptions about what a community might be. A particular industry group can be a community of interest if they are geolocated in a particular place. Renters or owners can be communities of interest. Ranchers could be communities of interest. You can define them as you wish. There are people who might say, hey, I want to go to my supervisor to see if they can get an ordinance in place that does X, or to see if I can get recognition, or to see if I can get funding from the county. There are people who might want to band together for a common object of a supervisor's attention. And so that's fairly expansive. It's as expansive as the number of things on which you might want to seek a supervisor's attention. And it's one of your tasks, and one of the reasons why the community has entrusted you rather than the supervisors to figure out which communities are most important and most in need of representation where around the county.
Commissioner Holtzman, then Commissioner Shida.
I've got a few questions on VRA, but feel free to stop me and take something from someone else. First question is about automated programs that purport to tell you if you got a map that meets the Voting Rights Act criteria. We've been told that some software we're getting will not let you submit a map that doesn't comply with the Voting Rights Act per its calculations, whatever they are. And it's said to have been prepared at the behest of the Department of Justice, the U.S. Department of Justice. Now you've told us that we don't have to worry about the California Voting Rights Act, but we do have to worry about what the feds say, the federal law. Have you heard of such programs? What do you think of that concept?
So part of my background, I served in the U.S. Department of Justice in the Civil Rights Division, the part that deals with redistricting from 2015 to 17. And so it deals with redistricting among other things. I have not heard of any Department of Justice mandated or preferred software, and would be, knowing what I know about them, shocked if that were the case. And if that were the case and I had not heard about it, I'd be shocked. And if that were the case flat out, I'd be shocked. It's not to say I get shocked on occasion. So it's possible it may have happened, but I think Department of Justice mandated or even thumbs up would be unlikely. I would be skeptical about the capacity of an automated program to accurately screen for Voting Rights Act compliance for a couple of reasons. Most automated programs are very good at screening for demographics. So if you feed census data in, they can tell you, do you have a district-sized population? Most programs won't actually give you a range. They'll pick a point. So no, right there, they may be limiting your options. And then they'll be able to say, is there a group that's 50% or more of the CVAP within that district-sized population? But most programs are very bad at gauging electoral effectiveness. That takes a real, it's both art and science of trying to determine which races give you the best sense of whether voting is really racially polarized and to what extent, and at what point an electoral coalition will actually be effective enough to provide an equitable opportunity. Those are things that I have not seen an automated program do well yet. And so I would be extremely surprised if one were available that actually purported to establish compliance from the get-go.
Thanks. So can I ask you about that?
Mr. Holtzman, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
We are running short of time to get to the other important business. I want to respect Mr. Levitt's time as well, since he agreed to come here for an hour, and we've been considerably over that. If Commissioners Vento and Stetcher have comments that are short and targeted, and they need to ask them tonight, I'm okay with that. Otherwise, if you can hold them, perhaps ask them separately. If there are other commissioners as well who have not had a chance yet to speak, though, I want to make sure they have a chance. I know Commissioner Sridharan had her hand up, and she's now, I don't know if she's still interested in speaking, but I believe you were next.
My question was actually about the efficacy of algorithms to do this kind of analysis. So my question's actually been foreseen and answered. Thank you.
I don't know, Ty, which one was next? Go ahead and ask them.
So Commissioner Vento, then Commissioner Stetcher.
If I can, Commissioner Vento, if I can just add a tiny little footnote to Commissioner Sridharan's foregone question. There's a difference between using algorithms to give you a thumbs up or thumbs down on VRA compliance and using algorithms to help you find opportunities or possibilities. And there are many actually good, effective ways to use algorithms. You have to do it in a sophisticated fashion. There are some dumb ones that don't work and some smart ones that do work, but there are good tools that can help. I just haven't yet seen one that can deliver a thumbs up or thumbs down. So I didn't want my skepticism about what you would describe, Commissioner Holtzman, to be also an answer to, should we be skeptical about all algorithmic assistance? And the answer is maybe, but they can also be used to help you as well as some that don't work so well. Pardon me, Commissioner Vento, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Nope. No problem, Mr. Levitt. By the way, all I just wanted to say is that Dr. Rafe Sonnenschein says hello, and he's glad that you joined our meeting tonight. So that's all.
It's wonderful to hear that, and I can thank him for his past service as much as I can thank all of you for your present service.
Commissioner Stetcher.
Yes, I believe this is quick. Would you tell me if the following calculation is right? The county has roughly 10 million people. Each of the 5 districts would have roughly 2 million people. To constitute a 50% group, a racial ethnic group within one of those districts would have to be 1 million people. So there aren't very many groups that meet that threshold.
So 2/3 of that was right. But the final third I'd like to correct. And I do want to say, roughly 10 million is right, roughly 2 million is right, but you know, we're all waiting on the census data to tell us what the actual number is. And in a county as large as Los Angeles, those small variations can actually be quite large numbers of people. The third step is, this is where the distinction between total population and CVAP comes in. So a district-sized population will be 2 million people more or less. And I want to encourage you to use the 10% top to bottom variance that the Supreme Court generally accepts. So smaller or larger range of that. But the citizen voting age population within that district size population may be very different depending on what part of LA County you're in and what community you're considering. And so the number of people in a citizen voting age population to reach 50% will be different from 1 million. I don't know, in order for it to be 1 million, everyone in that total group would have to be a citizen and a voting age. That's extremely unlikely. I don't know how much more or less it would be than 1 million. It depends on the demographics locally. But it is true, the supervisory districts are very large, and there are few minority communities that on their own reach that threshold. I'll say that on their own is another important caveat. This is why I stress community or communities. If communities have similar voting patterns, then they're considered as one for Voting Rights Act purposes. And even beyond the Voting Rights Act, it is also okay to consider whether, up to you, a particular racial or ethnic group that does not reach that threshold comprises a community of interest.
Professor Levitt, thank you very much for this presentation. Your students are very lucky to have you to be able to break down this pretty complicated set of things for us in a way that I think has gotten us thinking about these things. And I'm sure we'll have to do more studying or look at your slides, but I really do appreciate this introduction to a very complex topic.
My pleasure, and I thank you for all of your work. I do want to say, I may have misspoken at the very beginning when I said I'd be more than happy to answer questions. I will be more than happy to answer questions consistent with the Brown Act. So if the commission can find a way to get me questions in a way that I can find a way to get you answers, I'm more than happy to do so, but I certainly don't want to lead you astray in responding to any questions that you may have separately or privately. So if there's a way to do that, I'm perfectly available to you.
Thank you very much. We'll explore that. Okay, the next item is 6B, various reports. This is where we hear, and I realize that there is a public comment, and I'll get there. We were going to hear brief reports from our working groups. I do want to announce that Co-Chair Williams and I met and have sort of agreed to divide up the various 6 working groups so that we will be a liaison to, one of us will be a liaison to each of the working groups. And so she's agreed to be the liaison to the public outreach, mapping and demography, and the values working group, the values one winding down. And I will be the liaison for the education and legislation / other CRC working group. And then I was also had that role with the bylaws group, which has now wound down. So I see we have a public comment in general on item 6 from Pablo Mendoza. Perhaps this is a good time to hear that public comment.
And Gayla, will you be able to take time for this? All right, so Pablo Mendoza, you will be prompted to unmute your mic so that you can speak. Pablo, please, you will have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to read this. Good evening. My name is Pablo Mendoza. I live in the unincorporated area of Valinda in the San Gabriel Valley. I've been taking an interest in the politics of this redistricting. I want to urge the commission to draw a second Latino district. Today, the Latino population is over 50% in this county. Most Valley County cities have a Latino population of over 60%. Our schools are predominantly Latino. The pandemic has revealed the devastating impact of Latinos. Latinos in LA County are dying at a rate of 25 a day per 100 Latino residents. That's still worse than the rate among whites and Asian Americans during any time the entire pandemic. Our Latino community is bearing the brunt. Today, the Board of Supervisors, represented by one member who is Latina, District 1. As a member to all of us here, 10 years ago, the Board of Supervisors had the opportunity to draw another Latino district, but the board failed. The reason we have an independent commission is because of the board's inability to change the times to protect the status quo and its institutions. I only hope 2021 will be different and this commission will make the difference. I want to remind the commission that what happened 30 years ago. As mentioned before, the 1990 Garza versus County of Los Angeles Board of Supervisors made clear that up to that time, there had been a historical and continuous official discrimination of Los Angeles County, stretching back to establishment of the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors in 1852. This includes police brutality during the Zoot Zoot riots, the sterilization of Mexican women at General Hospital, and the dislocation of Mexican families at Chavez Ravine, which we know is the home of the Los Angeles Dodgers, right? Garza resulted in redistricting of Los Angeles County and facilitated the election of one Latina, Gloria Molina, to the Board of Supervisors. And she remained the only one represented Latina.
Mr. Mendoza, your time is up.
I just got about 30 more seconds.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mendoza. Thank you very much. If you'd like to submit a comment in writing, then we will, of course, be able to take that.
There are no other public comments.
Thank you. Okay, the first working group we'd like to hear from is Apolonio Morales of the Public Outreach Working Group.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair Maeda. And so, thanks to everybody who's participating in the Ad Hoc Working Group, having this very important discussion about how we engage with the community at large through a very strategic approach to be able to make sure that we are, as Mr. Levitt has explained, that we are listening to what folks have to say. And so to that end, we wanted to make sure that we are having the two April workshops specifically tailored towards letting folks know, community-based organizations and faith-based organizations to provide the slide deck that we've presented out for folks to take a look at and be able to see what it is that our function is, who we are, and what we're setting out to do in these upcoming hearings. So that would be April 6th, 5 to 6 p.m. For community-based organizations and faith-based organizations, and April 20th for cities, government agencies, and educational systems. So the other idea that we wanted to, in terms of the actual hearings themselves, we wanted to really explore this idea, providing forums for folks to be able to partake earlier before we get into more specific. The requirements are to be able to make decisions through the public hearing process. So taking more formal public comments and having these different hearings in different locations or in different districts. And we could talk about that in just a little bit, but more specifically to take the time before we get into these public hearings to provide a public forum for folks to be able to, in a more, kind of a better, not better, but a simpler way to engage and have a conversation as opposed to just being limited to 2 minutes specifically. And so the idea is to have these before we have these public, some of these public hearings, to be able to gather that information. And we want to make sure that folks understand that there's equal weight to both the public comments and the comments that are going to be collected in the public forums. And so, again, we're finding some ways to be able to do that. And we're also considering having a Spanish workshop as well to make sure that we're capturing that information from folks in the community that are directly impacted. And also a 7th workshop that would be open for anyone in the county, which is, not specifically for a particular district, but these last 2 hearings would be taking place on a Saturday. And so that would provide for folks to be able to provide, their input, whether it's through the formal hearing process or the actual, the other means of public forum. And so this is what the calendar is looking like. And so the idea was, we continue to meet on Wednesdays. And so we could use this time knowing that most of us are available, certain Wednesdays out of the month, to be able to also by supervisorial district, starting with the first for Wednesday, May 5th, we would be focusing on that supervisorial district to also engage commissioners that fall within that supervisorial district. So for instance, for SD1, we would have Commissioners Obregon, Commissioner Segura, and Soto to be invited to be participating in that particular public forum and hearing. And so it goes on, supervisorial district 2, the 3rd, the 4th, and 5th, and we're all broken down in terms of where we're located in terms of our supervisorial districts. Same concept applies. And then the Spanish and the general public forums and the public hearings would be taking place on those Saturdays. And so there's certain things that we have to take into consideration in terms of how many commissioners can be part of the public forum and versus how many actually have to be part of the public hearing. And so we're bearing that in mind. We need a quorum of 9 to be able to take those public comments and take everything in that more formalized structure. And then we can't have more than 7 for the public forum. So we just want to underscore that. But this is where we're at in terms of being able to organize these in an effective manner and also spread them out in a way that can allow for multiple opportunities for folks to provide some input. I believe that's it.
Questions?
Commissioner Vento, then Commissioner Stetcher.
Great work, Polo. Great job on this. I just had a question. How are these these different organizations, like the faith-based organization, can be recognized or communicated with, that they would be holding these specific meetings for them?
Yeah, so we had discussed that we have been using and building upon the existing census outreach. So there's a lot of organizations that have already been communicating, folks that have signed on onto the website as well. Organizations are watching and waiting for us to begin these. And so, we want to make sure that we're engaging them, and we're also encouraging those different coalitions to be able to spread the word through their networks as well.
Commissioner Stetcher?
There we are. Sorry. My question is about the first two workshops that you have planned for the groups. I don't understand why no more than 7 commissioners could attend any one, since these do seem to be about informing organizations and outreach, not about taking input or deliberating.
I'll jump in on that one. And it really is driven by the Brown Act. If you have more, if you start approaching a majority, certainly if you get to a quorum, then you run into Brown Act problems. So the way to just be clear and not have any of that is to limit the maximum number that can participate to 7. It's a Brown Act. It's driven by the Brown Act.
You look
Holly,
puzzled, Commissioner.
I can ask you about follow-up later. I mean, this evening, never mind.
Holly, would we be able to just watch it on YouTube?
If you're watching it, I'm not sure they're planning on doing a live broadcast of YouTube. You probably could watch it on YouTube, because YouTube doesn't allow for the give and take that can happen if you're there, even virtually in person. YouTube is just you could watch it, a recording of it later, or even, I guess, live.
Or we could do it live on YouTube. Either way, if that would be beneficial.
You know what? I'll work with Gayla on this, and we'll come up with some guidelines on this and share it with you.
Any other questions or comments?
Just want to add, Co-Chair Mayeda, about a follow-up survey with the attendees for these hearings in the public forums to make sure we're continually getting a feedback in terms of how things are going, anything we need to change or shift around, and that would be provided by or created or helped to be created by Commissioner Orpinel Segura. Sorry, the slide moved before I got to that opportunity. But yeah, we definitely have to make sure that we're doing these effectively, and that we are, making sure that we're, getting a sense of whether we're doing it right.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, next is a very important discussion by the Redistricting, Mapping, and Demography Working Group, and I know that Commissioner Sridharan is going to want to share all the things that their working group has been doing. So you're up.
Happy to do that. I noticed that there's an additional Julia Gomez who wants to give public comment on 6BI and 6B1 and 6B2. I didn't know if we wanted to do that first or wait until we've done these presentations, but.
Okay, I now see that. I didn't see that before. Okay, outreach. So I think go ahead. Let's go ahead and have Ms. Gomez provide her comment.
So Julia A. Gomez from ACLU SoCal, you will have 2 minutes to make your public comment. Gayla, will you be able to take the time? Okay. So Julia Gomez, you will be prompted to unmute your mic and you will be able to begin speaking.
Good evening, commissioners. I mostly had questions about outreach. I'm curious about whether, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Morales, if you answered this, whether the public forums will be completely virtual. And if they are, just out of curiosity, how will they be targeted to a particular district to ensure that, you know, all districts are being covered? And also, I know you all will be presenting a slide deck during the public hearings, but me and people from the League of Women Voters think it would also be a good idea to have a slide deck on redistricting to present during the public forums, just to give the community some background. Regarding demography, I took a look at the RFP, the draft RFP, and I thought I had seen something in there about a potential delay in census data, but I went back and I couldn't find that. Obviously, we still don't know what effect, if any, that will have on the December 15th deadline. But if there's not something in there already, I think the RFP/work plan should include sort of like a notice to the demographer that they're, you know, that if redistricting goes beyond December 15th, that they would still be available to continue working with the commission. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Gomez. Is there any other public comment?
Okay. There are no other public comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Sridharan.
Great, thank you. So I'll just thanks to my colleagues on the Demography Working Group, Commissioners Holtzman and Stetcher and Wong and Obregon. We've met a couple of times and continue to meet weekly. We have been focusing kind of on three things broadly in terms of defining the work plan of our working group. On the front end, we've been focused on making sure that we get the mapping platform set up and initial data sets ready so that we as the commissioners, but as well as members of the public, can start accessing the platform that ultimately maps could be submitted through. The county is actually doing a lot of the work of contracting for the system and getting that set up. Initial data sets will include updated versions of all of the data sets that were used 10 years ago, so that's useful as a starting point. We anticipate that we will have additional requests for data that the Redistricting Coalition, other organizations, other communities will as well. On the back end, we have been talking quite a bit about how to manage this compressed schedule to propose and have enough public hearings and finalize and vote on the maps and the final report that accompanies the map by December 15th, by the deadline. So I won't spend much time on that today, but that is something we're discussing. I think my guess is that several of the working groups are thinking generally about how to most effectively use the months before September 30th, thereabouts where we expect the census data to come out, given that we will be kind of in a mad dash after that, to ensure that we're sort of ready to hit the ground running when we have the data. So I think that conversation is happening on multiple levels and will continue to unfold for the whole commission. The third thing that we've been talking about in earnest that I think is sort of useful to focus on today and use our time to get to hear any commissioner input and discussion is the RFP for the demographer. So we have been focusing on, in general, just securing, helping the commission move forward in hiring a demographer. This is obviously a critical role that we need to staff. The RFP lays out the tasks, the work of the demographer kind of in four major tasks. Starting with, I'll get to the task in a second. So a couple of things to say about this. The first is it's a relatively small universe of people who have redistricting and demography experience both. The universe gets smaller when you consider that our demographer must meet the same conflict of interest rules that we all met. So folks that have been working in political office who might have lots of reasons to have exposure to redistricting might not be eligible, right? So it's a small universe. That said, especially because it's a small universe, we want to cast as wide a net as possible. And so we, urge commissioners to, if you know people, if you have contacts who know people who do this kind of work, to encourage the people that you know to consider proposing in response to the RFP. Same thing with members of the public and the many organizations that are already organizing around redistricting, just to help us kind of broaden the pool of people who we could consider. The other thing is that the timeline is tight. On the next slide is kind of the timeline that we envision. So our hope is that we would be able to have a demographer on board by June 1st, which is about halfway through the public hearings. And as we're, getting set up to start using data and using the mapping system, And so in order to do that, we would ideally take feedback and discussion today, feedback from any members of the public or organizations that are involved that want to submit feedback. Please submit them to the executive director via email, and we'll incorporate and review that feedback. But ideally be able to vote on the RFP and the selection process in 2 weeks at our next meeting. And moving forward from there, be able to issue the RFP by April 1st, thereabout, and then, you know, receive proposals by the end of April, review them, and ideally settle on someone that we can contract with by beginning of June. Big picture, I won't read it to you, but I think the overarching tasks of the RFP are kind of broken down into 4 sections. The first is essentially planning and getting us set up. I think, you know, we have the opportunity to ask every expert that our education working group brings to us to present to us how they would effectively use the time before September 30th. You know, I think that's something our demographer should ideally be helping us with as well. One thing that's not called out very specifically in the RFP, in the planning section, we do talk about having someone who can do Voting Rights Act analysis. We don't specifically mention racially polarized voting analysis, and I think we should think about whether we want to include that, or whether that's in some ways potentially a separate contract, right? Is that, you know, as Professor Levitt said, political science professors do that work. They might not be demographers per se. So, you know, I'll just leave that there. I think whoever does the racially polarized voting analysis, it sounds like that really should happen on the front end, and that will dovetail with the work of the demographer if it's not the same person. So after planning public involvement, you know, helping us really facilitate meaningful education, training, and ultimately input from communities. So both in proposing a full map and in being able to identify their communities of interest that we would then incorporate and consider in mapping. Third, the process by which we review maps submitted by the public. So I think a demographer can really help us with some preliminary analysis and help us think about each thing that's proposed, what each map accomplishes, and help us kind of make decisions from there. And then finally, ultimately, the demographer will draw the map with our direction, right? So our direction, which will be based on all of this analysis and public input, they will sort of ultimately produce that final map, produce the report that goes with it. So that's kind of the nutshell. I kind of want to get out of the way and hear discussion, feedback, et cetera, if that's appropriate at this time.
Any questions or comments? I will say that although we did have one public comment today about the RFP, but I believe the materials have been available on the website, have been circulated, and I believe there were specific attempts to reach out to what we have been calling the coalition, but I guess it has a different name now. But the group of folks who have visited us frequently throughout our regular meetings to provide input to us and to help us to see if they knew of any demographers that they could recommend, to see if they have comments on the RFP, and hopefully within the next, before the next meeting, where we hope to actually vote on the RFP if we're going to maintain the same schedule that Commissioner Sridharan indicated. Hopefully we'll have that kind of additional public input. But do any of the commissioners have any comments or questions at this point for this working group?
Commissioner Vento.
Great work, Commissioner. I just wanted to say I agree with you. I think that we should consider what Justin Levitt said about having maybe someone else do a kind of an analysis of racial polarized voting. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Commissioner Jean Franklin.
Yes, I would just like to recommend, if possible, that the selection of a demographer, if we can push it up, June 1st seems a long time. I'm just wondering if we can push it up at least a month, because if I'm not mistaken, I believe we can start drawing maps now. So, and we don't really necessarily need to wait on the census that will be coming out in September, because there's a lot of work to be done. And so we really need the demographer as soon as possible. And I think June is a little bit a lengthy time.
So actually, I don't think we can begin drawing maps until after the public hearings. Holly, is that right?
That's correct. We need to complete the 7 public hearings before we can draw any map that is released. And
Yeah.
there's also a time period where we need to wait, I believe, until there's also kind of a waiting period after the data first comes out.
You mean the census data comes up before we can start
Yes.
drawing? So there's a lot that we can do, and I think the working group is exploring what are the different things we can do to sort of get ready, training ourselves as well as gathering whatever data we can gather. But the actual map drawing can't happen for a while. As to whether we can move this up, I mean, if you look at the slide that has the schedule, it's very tight. Assuming we approve the RFP next meeting, which is 2 weeks from today, then very shortly after that, perhaps immediately after that, we can put out the RFP. But we do have to give folks some time to apply, right? To actually read the RFP and to put in their materials. So we looked at this. I'm sure the working group looked at this and seeing if maybe we can shave a week or so off, but it's pretty tight actually. And the demographer is going to have the public hearings will be taped. I assume they'll be recorded, so the demographer will have the opportunity to review those as well. I mean, all around, we're looking at very tight timelines, I think.
Commissioner Holtzman.
Thanks. On item 7 on the slide that's on the screen, it says develop a short list of demographers to invite to present before the full commission, and target date is May 12th. Could we change that to actually have the short list come before the commission on May 12th for interviews then?
I think that makes sense if we can, because we'll have 2 weeks to review, and that would also, I mean, we could also, so one, I think that makes sense, move that up to May 12th, actually have them come on May 12th.
I think that was the intent, though.
Or is that what's implied by number 7, right? That was the intention. I was looking at it thinking maybe that means we could actually vote on May 12th, but I think that is probably not realistic.
So May 12th was to be the oral presentations of your final candidates to be demographers before the full commission. Give the commissioners 2 weeks before they vote on which one they want to go with. You could possibly, after you hear the orals, be able to select. But normally you do want some time for scoring, looking at the criteria before you do the final vote, but you could do it on the same night. And that would save you 2 weeks.
You also want public input after the interview.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's just not clear how it's stated there.
That's fine. We can clarify that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stetcher, then Commissioner Orpanella Segura.
Thank you. 2 quick things. One is, I think that Commissioner Franklin is right that if we had the demographer earlier, we could do a lot of useful analyses, not draw maps, but begin using the community survey and other census data that we will have, begin to look at where various groups are located and get started and fiddle individually, informally with the layout of the population groups in the county. So sooner would be better, but this schedule is fairly accelerated as is. Point 2, I don't think we're being clear to ourselves about when we expect the other commissioners to give us feedback. So the demography subgroup worked hard to get this out so that it would be available in the packet. And we were hoping the other commissioners would be able to review it ahead of time and look at the RFP and give us feedback. But I don't think we told them that. And so in the future, maybe if we want feedback at a given time, we need to let people know that's our expectation or our hope.
I think that's actually a pretty good observation in terms of, so in addition to presenting materials in time for that to be posted, you all could, the working groups could let the co-chairs know that this is something we want to have happen, and we can figure out a way to make that happen in terms of letting the other commissioners know that this is a task that that the working groups are looking for the commissioners to fulfill at the next meeting. Thank you, Commissioner Stetcher.
Commissioner Orpanela Segura, would you like to still speak?
Yes, it's just a brief question. Will we have a scoring guideline when we do hear from the demographers to help us make a decision in selecting?
That's a great question. So I think the next piece that the working group needs to work on is actually developing a proposed selection process for the commission's consideration, including a scoring rubric for the written proposal and a set of questions that we will ask, because the questions should all be the same for all proposers, a set of questions that we will ask in the live oral presentations, and a scoring rubric for that as well. So that's our next accelerated task that we'll be tackling starting tomorrow.
Sorry, I have one more question. Thank you so much for answering that. In terms of the presentation, will we give the demographers guidelines for presentations? An example, a 30-minute presentation, I guess a time guideline to be fair to all participants.
Yes, that's a good point. We should.
Are there any other comments or questions? I'm certain that the working group would request now, since it may not have been as clear before, please do review the materials, provide any input that you can, before the next meeting, so that the working group can grapple with it. And the hope is to vote on this. If we want to keep to even this timetable that we have, we will actually need to approve this next meeting 2 weeks from today. So please make sure you've done that so that we can come prepared to finalize and vote and approve it and get going on hiring the demographer, which everyone agrees is a crucial task for us to do the work.
Commissioner Zaida Soto has her hand up.
Thank you, and sorry for jumping in so late. Can you, Commissioner Sridharan, can you clarify what the public will have access to? For example, will the public have access to all submitted proposals? Is it just access to those that make the top for us? And then I'm assuming that all commissioners will have access to all proposals that come in as well.
That's a great question. So partly I'm going to answer by saying that I think in late April, we will have the county staff coming to present the platform to us, explain how it will work for us and for the public, explain what we'll be able to see, what everyone will be able to see versus not see. Based on a preliminary conversation, I believe is the case that people can work. So the members of the public will have access to the same data sets that we have in that system. They'll be able to work with those maps. They'll be able to use that tool to present a map of a subset of the county. So this is where I would draw the boundaries of my neighborhood, my community, and so forth, or propose a whole set of 5 districts, ideally. That I believe people can work in those maps and keep them, they have an account on the system. They can work within their account, work with their maps. No one else is seeing them. We're not seeing them. They can share them with friends, colleagues, partner organizations to work together. Eventually, when they choose to submit it, right, then it's viewable. And I don't know if it's viewable to everyone or just the commission. I suspect it's everyone. I'm not certain. I think there's then a second step, which is how do we make everything accessible and viewable that's under consideration to members of the public? So I think some of that we'll know more when when the county's got the system up and running and we can talk it through with them. Hopefully that was helpful preliminarily though.
Yes, and I'm sorry. My question was, will the public have access to all proposals or responses to the RFP?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant proposed maps.
Your response or your understanding of my question was helpful anyways, so thank you.
That's a good question. So Gayla, we've talked about this and now I'm not remembering what your guidance was on this.
Yeah, so normally in public procurement, the proposals, people who are bidding are asked to indicate if something's proprietary and cannot be shared with the public. Normally what is shared is the winning proposal, and usually not all of the bidders. But this is something that your ad hoc working group has to sort of work through, because it has to be built into the RFP if in fact you're going to share all of the proposals with the entire public. The oral presentations will obviously be available for the public. There will be PowerPoints. They'll be able to see the candidates that way as well. But we really don't know. The other question related to this is how many proposals you receive. So your ad hoc working group is advisory, but if they develop a screening tool, let's say they get 7 proposals, they may bring forward to you the top 3 candidates or the top 4 or top 2. You as a full commission are the ones who have to vote and select whom you think is best. And if you don't like what they bring forward, you might say, what else do you have? Or you might want to say, and this would be helpful to know now, we want to see all of the proposals make an oral presentation. And again, that has to do with your tolerance for how many people might be presenting and how much time. But it would be very helpful for the work group to have your input on that.
Okay. Anything else? Commissioner Sridharan, thank you very much for leading that group. It's obvious that your group has done a lot and will continue to do a lot. Please do, all commissioners, I urge all of you to review the materials and to provide the input to that working group so it can get ready to present the RFP in a form that we can vote on next 2 weeks from now. All right, the next working group is Commissioner Mendoza, the leader of the education working group. And we already got off to a flying start. Thank you for that. Maybe you can tease us with what's to come. And I believe you also have a proposal to make regarding the honorarium.
Yes, thank you, Co-Chair Maeda. As mentioned previously, the working group consisting of myself and Commissioner Vento's goal has been to secure services gratis. And we're pleased to say that for the next 5, actually including this meeting, 6 meetings, we've been successful. Mr. Justin Lewitt's services were gratis. So we appreciate his willingness to speak to us today. And we hope going forward, we'll continue to be able to secure the service of some very prominent people and not be required to pay an honorarium. However, we'd like the opportunity to do so and have the latitude to do so of up to $1,000 if needed. And I want to point out, or we want to point out, that there is a budget for this. So it was contemplated previously, and coincidentally, the budget for the speaking engagement was $1,000. John and I came up with that independently, and when we talked to Gayla, she said that, well, she confirmed that that's basically what we had. So that was pure coincidence. So also, as it pertains to an honorarium, we do not believe it's appropriate we had some guidance from Holly and Gayla on this to make a contribution to a nonprofit organization. So I don't know if this is voted on or how this gets approved, but that's our proposal as a working group on how to address honorariums.
I think we should go ahead and formalize that proposal in the form of a motion. Does anybody want to bring a motion to this effect?
I'll motion it.
Commissioner Vento has moved to adopt the proposed honorarium guidance or schedule that's in the materials. Is there a second?
I second.
Commissioner Franklin seconds.
Yes,
Any further discussion? Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
I believe Commissioner Holtzman has his hand up.
Votes for that.
Right. Commissioner Holtzman? You are muted.
Sorry. As I mentioned before, I do want us to be good stewards of taxpayer funds. And I also wanted to just mention that, money is fungible, so money we don't pay to speakers, we can use for other stuff. But Commissioner Mendoza, I do really appreciate your efforts to get us good speakers and to bring this proposal forward. I don't know if we'd call it an honorarium if it's not going to an organization or a nonprofit. It sounds to me more like a speaker's fee, or a lecture. I don't know if you want to change the wording, or if you like honorarium. That's the suggestion I just want to make about the motion. And again, I really appreciate your efforts to get what we can for free. Oh yeah, the other thing I was going to say is don't forget that of course we can find links on the internet to all sorts of trainings that might be useful from some of the presenters that we've had and might want to have. So just consider that in implementing this if the motion passes. But I'm not going to, whatever. The honorarium, if you want to call it an honorarium, call it an honorarium. If you don't want to call it, if you want to call it a speaker's fee, that's fine. For some reason, I thought honorariums would go to organizations and not to speakers, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Does somebody want to look it up?
I have certainly received honoraria for speaking at events.
Oh, personally. Okay.
But personally.
Okay.
We thought that was the most appropriate word, but certainly we're not married to it. So if there's something more appropriate, we can entertain it. But that's what we thought worked best.
I thought it was if it was a speaker's fee, you would call it a speaker's fee. Okay. I'm not gonna make a motion to amend the motion. So I just wanted to say that and say that if this motion passes, I'm sure you will still make efforts to do you've been doing and get us free speakers or free education that's posted online for us to view or hear. Thank you.
Commissioner Morales, then Commissioner Saida Soto.
Thank you. So I was just going to say I work as for a nonprofit and I do get honorarium, but it goes towards the organization and not to the individual themselves. So just, yeah, that term can be used in many forms. My question was really around, is there any legal basis for not providing any funds for a nonprofit organization? I just want to be clear on that. And also for folks watching that the decision that we're taking is based on something significant here.
The short answer is yes. I don't happen to be an attorney. John was Commissioner Vento was motioning yes. Did you want to speak to that, John, or did you want Holly speak to it?
Yeah, let Holly speak.
Yeah, there was an issue here about the prohibition. The California Constitution has a prohibition on a gift of public funds, and how this came to our attention really was that some speakers said, "Well, don't pay us, but I'm going to direct you to pay your donation to this nonprofit," and so just so that we clearly don't get close to running afoul of any gift of public funds claims where those kinds of gifts can include making donations to nonprofits of the person's choice. So we just kind of wanted to keep everything clean here, and that's how it's based on that constitutional prohibition on a gift of public funds concept.
Commissioner Saida Soto.
I guess the challenge with that is that I know nonprofit leaders have very strict rules about taking a gift or an honorarium over a certain amount of money. And so I guess in this sense, in order to allow for a nonprofit expert to present to us, and I guess their only option is to say they will do it for free. And therefore someone who is not associated with a nonprofit can charge. They're not sort of held to this rule. So if there is any flexibility in the law, I guess it would be good to know.
It it can get complicated on what is considered a gift of public funds, and I admit that paying an individual who has given some education, there's been an exchange of value for that, and it is true that when someone declines the payment and says instead, please make a tax-deductible gift to this nonprofit, that it complicates it. And I'm aware of that distinction, and it seems to not feel so great. But I can assure you that having someone claim that we violated the constitutional ban on gift of public funds is more problematic. So I just think this is the best advice I have for you. And I recognize that issue that you raise, and I still advise that we take this approach.
Thanks, Holly. And then my second was, can someone restate the motion, please?
It's outlined basically in the screen that we want the authority to, as a commission, to pay up to $1,000 for a speaking engagement to an entity or an individual that's not associated with a nonprofit organization. But again, the goal has been, will be to secure services gratis, and where we have people donating their time. And that's what we've been able to accomplish for the next 6 meetings, or next 5 meetings.
Commissioner Wong, then Commissioner Holtzman.
Oh, I just realized, I guess thank you for going over it again, because now I'm reading it. So are we saying that if we can't even pay somebody that comes from a nonprofit? Because if a person comes from a nonprofit and they charge a fee, then we wouldn't pay that fee. Is that what you're saying? Because it seems to me that whatever that person wants to do with that money, up to that person. I mean, I've gotten speakers' fees for speaking at conferences and other events and trainings. So is it an explicit prohibition for even a staff from a nonprofit to get any type of payment? That's how it's written.
That's what we're proposing.
Let me be clear about the legal thing. It is, and that is a nuance. If the individual that comes, if the staff person comes to speak, and they are allowed to accept payment from us to speak, we can pay them. Where this came up is that we do have someone slated to speak that is coming from a nonprofit, that when there was an offer to pay an honorarium, we were informed, I won't take it, but please make a donation to the nonprofit that I work for. It's that thing that where we run into trouble. If the staff person is permitted to, if the check is written in the name of the staff person that comes to give the talk to us, the education, that's permitted because there's the person has given the commission something and the commission can pay for it.
Can we make that distinction in this motion then? Or does that mean amend the motion?
We can. May we hear the other commissioners' statements, all commissioner statements first, please?
Commissioner Holtzman, then Commissioner Stetcher.
Okay, so quickly, I should point out that I know people at organizations who work for organizations and government agencies sometimes have provisions in their employment contract which says they can't moonlight. In other words, they can't work on their own on the same subject matter that they're supposed to be working for the organization on. So I think that might have been one of the problems that we were having with that speaker who was scheduled later, that she couldn't accept a payment directly because that would be considered like moonlighting. Anyway, I just wanted to clarify then that the motion, it looks to me like the motion is to approve the proposed honorarium schedule as showed there on the screen on slide 19. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stetcher.
I just wanted to say that I've done this dozens of times, and it's usually an arrangement between the employee and the organization about what conditions permit them to take an honorarium. In our case, I accepted it, usually signed it over privately to the organization, which paid for my time. But that's perfectly legitimate as far as we're concerned. We are contracting with an individual. And most nonprofits of a reasonable size have figured out how to make these arrangements work.
That said, I made the John and I, Commissioner Vento and I are making this motion with, I believe, the concurrence of the co-chairs. So if if Holly agrees that if we're paying individuals and an individual works for a private concern or a nonprofit, and the individual is operating as an individual in that capacity, speaking or to the commission, and it's not an issue legally, I don't think we object to that.
I'm sorry, can I step in for a second? The motion is whatever page this is, page 19. It says that the working group is going to try to get folks to donate their time. If necessary, they're willing to pay up to $1,000, but no more than $1,000. That money would be paid to a speaker, an individual. It will not be paid, donated to a nonprofit. If that speaker, though, comes from a nonprofit, demands the $1,000, takes our check, we're done. We don't ask, what are you going to do with that money? Are you going to give it to your, we're just done. We've given the money and it's for the services of that individual, and that's fine. That's the way I read this. There's nothing in this that prohibits that activity. Chances are it's never going to come up. This person is probably not going to demand that money, and or we can find someone else because their task is to try to find folks who will do it gratis. But in the event it does come up, that's the way I read this to work. Commissioner Mendoza, do you have a different view of that?
No, I don't. I concur. So that would then mean that an individual is employed by a nonprofit, any honorarium they receive would have to be made out to the individual as opposed to their organization.
Correct.
Okay, got it. And if that's legally permissible, we're for it.
That, if I could just weigh in, that is exactly how I read this, and that it's as long as the speaker, it's made out to the speaker and the speaker accepts it, we are agnostic as to whether the speaker comes from a nonprofit or a consulting firm or anything else. It's just that I'm advising you not to take direction to instead donate money to the nonprofit instead of giving it to the speaker. That's the distinction.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it matters not where what type of organization an individual works for. If they're going to speak they're entitled to an honorarium if one is to be paid.
And this is the way in which we are not discriminating against people who happen to work for nonprofits. They may have their own reasons that they can't accept it, but we're not imposing that kind of discrimination on that basis. Commissioner Holtzman, do you have something new to add to this discussion?
What I want to say is I'm ready for a vote if everybody else is ready for a vote.
Commissioner Holtzman calls the question. Is there any other discussion? Okay, can we, Ty, can you go ahead and ask us for our votes?
I will now take the roll call. Commissioners, please be prepared to unmute your mic and respond when your name is called. Co-Chair Daniel Maeda.
Aye.
Commissioner Mark Mendoza.
Aye.
Commissioner Apolonio Morales.
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson Obregon.
Yes.
Commissioner Priscilla Orpinella Segura.
Yes.
Commissioner Haile Soto.
Yes.
Commissioner Zaira Soto.
Yes.
Commissioner Priya Shidarai.
Yes.
Commissioner Brian Stetcher.
Yes.
Commissioner John Bento.
Yes.
Co-Chair Carolyn Williams.
Yes.
Commissioner Dorina Wong.
Yes.
Commissioner Jean Franklin.
Yes.
Commissioner David Holtzman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Excellent. Commissioner Mendoza, I noticed in your packet there's different speakers lined up for the coming
and I'll make
weeks.
it
Sure.
very quickly. Just run through that because we can all read that. But at the next meeting we have Ms. Kate Fang is going to speak on Redistricting 101, and we could, at your leisure, we can check or look at her bio if anyone cares to do that. And then in April, we have a combination speakers, and this is going to be the county, I presume, county council, somebody from the county council's office, talking about the legislative process and in light of the delayed census information. And that'll be 30 minutes. And then we have a working group, and I count 9 different entities that comprise that. We'll hear from them. It'll be split time between having them introduce themselves and us as commissioners being able to ask questions of them. And then as we move to April, the LA County mapping individual or representatives will be in to help us understand how that all works. And then in May, we have, and I want to commend Commissioner Bento because he secured Dr. Sonnenschein personally. So he's going to come and speak to us. And then finally, May 26th, this border redistricting committee, LA County, and it's this BRC is basically, we're going to talk to them about lessons learned because they're our predecessors that did this 10 years ago. And we think it's good to have that discussion.
Thank you. That'll be very interesting. Okay, it's going to be my goal to try to wrap this meeting up as close to 9:30 as possible. So let's see if we can get there. The next is the Values Committee, and Commissioner Bento, if you could take us to a motion to approve these values, but go forward.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Maeda. First, I wanted to just reach out to Commissioner Franklin and Commissioner Soto for including some commentary from the last meeting about the word service and equitable. And I just wanted to highlight this there. Then we have them in bold. Commissioner Franklin, we added the word serve in the accountability. We are accountable to the process and each other to serve all constituents of Los Angeles County. And I just wanted to recognize your commentary on that. And then Commissioner Soto, we used the word equitable. We said we are in objectivity. We are careful, intentional, fair-minded, and impartial, and will actively resist undue influence in establishing supervisorial district boundaries in an equitable manner. And I just wanted to add that. And I just wanted to tell you that we took your commentary and made sure those words were in there. And then I just wanted to thank Commissioners Mendoza and Commissioner Polo, I'm sorry, might have drawn a blank, and Commissioner Carolyn for their help and support. And I just wanted to thank Gayla for this. So do we have do we have a motion for this or do we have any commentary?
It's just
Well,
that's Commissioner Maeda who came in with the respectful.
Right. Thank you.
Commissioner Saida Soto has her hand up.
Thank you. And my apologies, Commissioner Vento. I sent you some language on equity as a value, and I sent that earlier this morning. So I'm hoping that we can read that and consider adding that as a value. My statement was really more around equitable access and opportunity to engage in the process for our communities. So I can pull up that language and read it out loud. Or if you have that and you want to show your screen, what's your preference?
No, I haven't checked my email on that. But if you want to read it, we can hear it.
Sure. Again, apologies, and here it is.
You know what I can do, Saida? Why don't I type it as you read it so everybody can see the words? So let me get back in here and.
Thank you, Gayla.
Thank you. Equity.
Give me a sec.
Sure.
Whoops. I just lost it. 1 second. Whoops. Wrong document. 1 sec. I had it. So let me type. Sorry, I'm all finger thumbs right now.
Okay, so, and I tried to align this with sort of your format. I hope it works. Equity. We will eliminate potential barriers and target outreach efforts to increase the engagement of communities that have historically been excluded in the redistricting process.
I think you need to read it again.
Sure, yeah. We will eliminate potential barriers and target outreach efforts to increase the engagement of communities that have historically been excluded in the redistricting process.
Increase the engagement of communities
that have historically been excluded in the redistricting process.
Kayla, it's hard to hear you. Is it just me?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that better? No.
So that's the full of it.
Okay.
So we have a couple more hands up as well. Commissioner Stetcher, then Commissioner Mendoza.
I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of wordsmithing, but I don't actually understand what it means to be accountable to the process. Does that mean we're accountable for the process and to each other? Or do I just not know that formulation, accountable to the process?
The process to staying independent and following the guidelines that we are learning through this process.
Commissioner Mendoza, and then Commissioner Holtzman.
Yeah, I'm reading the equity value, and the can I get an example or two of this? It's a directive basically that we're a charge to ourselves. We will eliminate potential barriers, and we'll do that. And what and how would we be doing that as an example?
Sure. So I mean, I think in light of what our guest shared with us, right, about the blatant attempts to prevent communities from being engaged or even being seen in the process, I think this word almost stands stronger. So what I mean by that is that we will ensure and work hard to make sure that we're eliminating barriers to engagement for those communities who often, whether that's making sure we're providing language access, that we're providing options for joining the public hearings, but also our general meetings and so on, which is, I think is already happening.
Right.
Whether we're providing information at the appropriate time or with enough time for communities who often have barriers to access that information, have it. And so we're doing this, I would say, in the outreach plan already, but I think it's important to have this present as we move forward with our public outreach meetings and hearings.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. I'm wondering if though the inclusion and I'm remembering Apollonio talking about, I believe, what basically you're saying differently, and we came up with together, we will create and foster a true sense of belonging by being purposeful, deliberate, and effective and comprehensive public outreach, engagement, and feedback. So I'm wondering if the part that maybe is not covered in your equity value, we can incorporate into inclusion. So we don't have, I guess I was originally thinking if we have 6, 7, or 8 values and they start to be kind of watered down, in my mind anyways. But that's me.
Polo, did you want to explain your inclusion? Did you want to elaborate? Because I know we had a lengthy discussion about that. Do you want to contribute to that?
If I can respond first, really what I'm talking about is, again, doing more for those communities who generally have less, right? So doing more to make sure that those communities who have less access have access. Doing more so the communities who have less opportunity and more barriers to engage have those. And so I think to have that as a value as we move forward is essential. So that's really what I'm talking about, is more for those who have less. So if that's not clear here, I'm very open to editing that to make sure that that's clear.
And just to respond to Commissioner Vento, the inclusion concept is one more in fostering that sense of belonging. So we are all interconnected as human beings, and we, you know, I think the difference here is one of technical approach versus the value of. So I don't disagree with the equity as a value in itself, but I do see that, you know, one is more about the technical aspect of reaching out and ensuring that we have equity versus we are fostering an environment where folks feel comfortable to step into those systems and those structures, or the technical aspect to be able to be well represented in the process.
Commissioner Holtzman, then Commissioner Franklin.
I have 2 quick comments. One is that I think fostering a true sense of belonging is a little, I don't know, it's a little advertising-y. I would say foster true belonging, get the sense of belonging. The feeling isn't what matters, it's the action. But my main comment is that I don't think anything that says we will do something actually belongs in a value statement. Like Commissioner Mendoza said, this last one is, what do you say? It's a charge to ourselves. I don't think we want to put charges to ourselves in a value statement. So those are my 2 comments.
Commissioner Franklin.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with Commissioner Soto regarding reaching out to communities that have historically been excluded. So it's my concern that when this is all over on December 31st, that we can, at least I, as a commissioner, feel really good that we did everything that we could do to make sure that communities that have been historically been excluded that they're in the redistricting process. So those values drive and keep us on target. So I appreciate Commissioner Soto including the equity piece.
Co-Chair Williams?
I just wanted to say I appreciate including the equity piece, but I think it's more of an operationalization of our values. And I think when we put it together, our intent was to include that that piece in the inclusion piece, especially when we start to talk about belonging. So I think the intent is there. I'm not sure if we really need to target it. I guess my question would be, how do we eliminate potential barriers? It means we've got to go out and identify them, but I think we're moving in that direction with a comprehensive public outreach plan for engagement and feedback and helping people feel like they belong in the process.
Any other comments?
Well, I'm still on, I'm not muted. This, I guess I'm a little bit uncomfortable to reach communities that have historically been excluded. I don't know myself. I can guess what they may have been, but I don't know. I mean, are we all agreeing that we know and are acknowledging that that's taken place and we know these groups?
Commissioner Wong?
Yeah, yes, I do like the explicit calling out of equity, but I do agree that it's close, it's kind of connected to inclusion. So I would just maybe offer a slight amendment and say for the inclusion, I would call it inclusion and equity. And I would say, instead of we seek to create and foster a true sense of belonging and eliminate potential barriers by being purposeful, deliberate, and effective in comprehensive public outreach, engagement, and feedback. Because I think the equity part and the seeking to do these, and I can see how we could seek to do these by making it accessible through language or through the public hearings. And I like it being called out like that. But it is very close to inclusion.
Commissioner Franklin?
Okay, I don't want to, overstate this, but a couple of meetings ago, one of the public comments an individual made was concerning migrant workers. And so I think of migrant workers or homeless individuals, those individuals, African-American individuals that have not been included in the process of redistricting. That's why I'm really appreciative of the of historically been excluded. So that's my final statement.
Commissioner Orpanela Segura, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble. I switched over to my phone, so I may have missed something, but are we able to, oh, and I just saw that there was a change to the PowerPoint. My suggestion was going to be combining, like Commissioner Wong mentioned, inclusion and equity. And the combination that I was going to mention was to include the communities that have been excluded, communities excluded within inclusion, if that makes sense.
Ty, is there anybody else who has a hand up?
There are no other commissioners with their hand up.
So,
I'm sorry. Co-Chair Williams has her hand up.
Okay.
I would just like to see if we can capture Commissioner Wong's suggestion and have that in front of us to consider.
Commissioner Wong, can you go ahead and restate it, and then maybe Gayla can.
Okay, I think I was saying, so it would be inclusion and equity. We seek to create and foster a true sense of belonging and to eliminate potential barriers, and then the rest of by being purposeful, ... It does not include the historically, historically been excluded. So I'm not sure if we want to try. Mine didn't include that.
Is there a motion to adopt these draft values with this last iteration, an attempt to include the equity piece, at least in part, by combining it with the inclusion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there further discussion?
I believe I'm sorry. I believe Commissioner Mendoza and Commissioner Stetcher has their hand up. So Commissioner Mendoza.
Yeah, I think so. So is it what I think Gayla is doing the typing here. So is this the final inclusion and equity? I like that, the combination. We seek to create and foster a true sense of belonging and eliminate potential barriers by being purposeful, deliberate, and effective and comprehensive public outreach, engagement, and feedback. If that's it, yes, I like it, and I'm definitely in favor of it.
Commissioner Stetcher.
I think it needs one more round of review and could come back to us in 2 weeks.
Commissioner Saira Soto. Commissioner Saira Soto, you're muted.
I will send my notes on it if we're going to come back to these.
Commissioner Orpanela Segura, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just want to confirm. So we would only have inclusion and equity, not the equity above the last paragraph.
That's the motion.
Okay. If there is a motion on the floor, I think it's important that we have these values because we are on a speedy schedule. Was there a second to the motion?
There is.
So is the process next step to vote and see if that passes?
It is. We were seeing if there's further discussion, if there's a strong feeling that we should hold it over, that can be done as well. I will say, though, that this shows you the difficulty of wordsmithing documents at a meeting rather than before the meeting, which has happened in the case of the bylaws as well. So maybe it's inevitable, but this is one of the reasons why these meetings are dragging on, because folks are not paying attention to what the different materials are and reacting to them prior to the meeting whenever possible. But in any event, we have a motion. It's been seconded, and I'd like to hear whether there's a feeling that we should vote or whether we should put it off.
Commissioner Saira Soto.
If we can just make one last addition to this, by adding historically excluded communities, I think that really gets at the importance of equity.
Commissioner Mendoza.
And then I'd be comfortable voting.
I'm sorry.
And if that's the case, I would be uncomfortable with that addition. I don't think it needs to be stated. We're talking about what we're going to do, not what has happened in the past.
Equity is in response to that.
Commissioner Holtzman.
Likewise, I don't think we should say historically excluded communities if we're not going to name them, or if it's not clear what they are.
So we seem to be a bit stuck. Co-Chair Williams, this was your motion, I believe.
Yes, I'd like to call the question. Go with the motion that we would vote for these values. Well, it wasn't my motion. I seconded.
Oh, you were second. I'm sorry. Whose motion is this? Roll the tape. I don't remember myself. I thought it was you, Co-Chair Williams.
Well, if it's, I thought I seconded, but I would like to go ahead and vote on this as we have amended it here with inclusion and equity, and actually not include historically been excluded.
Okay, there's a request to call the question on this motion. It's been moved and seconded. Let's go ahead and take roll on, or take a vote on this.
Okay. I would now take a roll call. Commissioners, please be prepared to unmute your mic and respond when your name is called. Commissioner Mark Mendoza.
Yes.
Commissioner Apolonio Morales.
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson Obregon.
I'm going to abstain on this one.
Commissioner Priscilla Orpinella Segura.
Yes.
Commissioner Haile Soto.
Yes.
Commissioner Saida Soto.
Same.
Commissioner Priya Shidaran.
Yes.
Commissioner Brian Stetcher.
I apologize for not having done my homework and read this previously. No.
Commissioner John Bento.
Yes.
Co-Chair Carolyn Williams.
Yes.
Commissioner Torina Wong.
Yes.
Commissioner Jean Franklin.
No.
Commissioner David Holtzman.
Present.
Co-Chair Daniel Maeda.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great. Thank you very much for all your work and the input of various commissioners to improve this draft. Appreciate it. And then finally, we have the legislation/other CRCs working group. And I promise you, Commissioner Holtzman, this will not always be the last. When we have something to discuss and actually vote on, we will definitely move this up in the process. But the floor is yours.
All right, alrighty. I'm going to just share my screen to keep myself on track. This is the outline for my presentation, and I'm telling you I'm going to make this quick because I went over last time. On the next full commission meeting, we're going to be welcoming suggestions from commissioners for fixing the problem with the late census data or making it less of a problem through legislation or other changes. So commissioners, please write your suggestions down for next meeting. I can't have you emailing them to me because of the Brown Act. Thank you, Holly, for making that clear. Members of the public, however, anybody within the sound of my voice, you may and please do email me if you have ideas that might help with this. My email address is up there on the screen, dholtzman@crc.la.county.gov. So that bill we were talking about, SB 594, will probably be amended to actually address the problem that it doesn't yet, soon before a hearing in the Senate Elections Committee on April 12. The author and staff are hoping to work collaboratively with various groups on this, and very much welcome our commission's participation. So that's good. They're open to hearing from us. All right, last point is that our group's observation of other commissions is going to be focusing mainly on the other two independent county commissions. We still may base recommendations on practices or experiences of other commissions, especially independent commissions. And finally, basic info about all the other independent commissions in California is in the supporting document that we posted for this meeting, and you may read that on your own. So there's my quickie report.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? Commissioner Holtzman, can you take away the shared screen? Thank you.
That's what I am trying to do that now. I see it. I don't actually help. There you go. Thank you, whoever did that for me.
Any comments, questions, concerns? So please do think about and bring any suggestions you have in terms of the legislative process. And I know this work group as well, it will bring to the full commission if it learns of other practices or procedures or whatever that other commissions are doing that may be helpful, they may recommend those to us. One of the, as I mentioned, one of the things that we did was try to randomize a little bit the roll call. So roll call for votes. Okay, if there's no other comments on that, then the last thing I think is the staff reports. Gayla, do you have anything? We can't really hear you.
I was going to say we have future agenda items.
Oh, you're right. Future agenda items, Co-Chair Williams.
Just want to make sure that, are there any requests for items to be placed in future agendas? So if not, now we'll move on to the executive director's report. Kayla?
So Gayla seems to be having trouble being heard.
Oh, there she is. No, okay.
Okay, she has not.
All right. So Dan,
select the microphone, maybe, with a little up arrow next to the microphone, mute. See what your options
She's
are?
not muted is the problem.
Yeah, there are options you can get if you click the little caret next to mute. Maybe that'll help. No?
Okay, but I think she was hopefully indicating that she doesn't have a particular thing to report. So
on you, Co-Chair Mayor.
I beg your pardon?
I said it's on you.
Oh, so I entertain a motion to adjourn, or I'll just indicate that we will adjourn unless anyone has an objection. Thank you very much. We're slightly under our usual. I'm going to endeavor to get it down even further, but I do appreciate all your time, and for the public, thanks for hanging in there if anyone's still around. We will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you very much for all your work, Commission.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.